Hi folks, welcome back to Atebeno Park, and we're preparing a place for our first confirmed beta animal. So there's a reason this video is called Torvosaurus Viewing and not Torvosaurus Habitat. It's because the viewing building that you can see in progress here is the most complex build I've done in this park so far. It's got a lot of intricate bits to it, and the speed build is kind of long. So almost all of it will be building this structure. You can see that it's already in place there, and there's a bit of habitat wall in the back there. It's because I wanted to use the habitat wall to make the ground level viewing area glass in place. And I put concrete to either side to be something that's strong enough to contain the Torvosaurus, so it won't be charging into the building. And you'll see how I'm going to keep it away from the glass in a later part of the video. So uh, this is a little different from what I've been doing over on the other side of the park. This is, of course, the first habitat in the Jurassic section of the park, because Torvosaurus comes from the Morrison Formation, and it's one of the larger predators of the middle section of the Morrison. Allosaurus and its potential synonym dinosaurs who were of approximately Torvosaurus size. Uh, didn't really get to be that size till Torvosaurus was gone. So Torvo is our first Jurassic dinosaur confirmed for beta. So he gets the first habitat. And also lets me play in Jurassic area, which is a little different aesthetic for the landscaping. One of the bits I'm doing to make this an individual thing is you saw that stone wall going in there when everything else is wood, is that's going to be a little planting area. And a little different from some of the other stuff I've done before. And in keeping with making my park accessible to handicapped guests, there will be an elevator tower. That's what that is, so that they can come and get up to the upper platform if they so desire to watch the Torvosaurus. Um, Otherwise, they could go through the archways that are coming into play now and see it at ground level uh, to get a full effect for just how big this animal is. One of the things you may have noticed is I'm trying to stick with a theme that where guests in general go, I'm using archways for their entries. But for the handicapped accessible areas, I'm using the squared off openings. Just a little visual cue as to which way you should go depending on your capabilities. So it's basically a two-story structure. You can see there's a animal building there, and you may have glimpsed an animal in it. Obviously, we don't have Torvosaurus yet in alpha, and we don't have beta yet. So I'm using a stand-in for Torvosaurus for this build. I'm using the Tarbosaurus, a little similar sounding, and it turns out that Tarbosaurus and Torvosaurus are really not all that disparate in size. So uh, the viewing from the upper platform is modular pieces because it lets me do that nice round curve and match it with the wood. Yeah, so uh, not not too terribly surprising there. Trick is always making sure all the glass pieces are the right way around, or at least consistent way around. And I always like to get the metal edging of these guys showing when I can. in window things because that's what happens in real life. They have to set that glass in something, and it's usually not in the wall material. Um, I wanted to give our guests a little more sense of the more tropical rather than temperate nature of the Morrison times. So they're getting a solar skylight there to make this a little bit more like where those dinosaurs would be. Um, Unfortunately, the pieces available didn't play all that well with the roof elements and stuff. I've got this flat back on the side of that. That doesn't make me terribly happy, but it's what pieces I had that I could make this go now, and I will uh, keep my thinking cap primed to come up with a better solution. Uh, I might have one, but I don't know. Uh, so right now we can't do separate groups split off from a group. So this roof that I'm putting in is part of the group and pain in the butt to work under because the space is so relatively confined. Um, Ideally, this would be a separate group and you can then easily move it off and then move it back. Uh, and It's just easier to work with that way. You don't have to keep selecting all the roof pieces all the time that you want to move the roof so you can work on something underneath. Uh, and you can also see the edge, uh, whoops, before it disappears, the edge that was right there um, from the, I think that was a roof piece sticking through there. And eventually that'll all need to be cleaned up and by scaling the pieces so that they fit inside the walls that are there. Um, so little ventilation there. So that upper area that faces the front of the building uh, can act as a heat tower. So that heat from inside the building will rise into it, at least in some places, and then can vent out, the slat wall venting kind of thing. While I was doing those slat walls for that section, I noticed that I kind of liked the end sticking out. Uh, so here you can see me uh, implementing that kind of neat effect for a decorative element in, um, in a building. Uh, Here on the elevator tower and trying to discover if it's going to play well either with the opening for the elevator door, which will eventually go in, or the inside the viewing area uh, thing. So the elevator tower gets a typical low slope roof. Uh, and One of the things this sort of evokes is a little bit of a frontier fort effect. I'm not really trying very hard for that, uh, but it gives it a slightly different vibe from some of the other buildings. And that helps set off this area, this Jurassic area, um, from the other buildings, so it gives you a little bit more sense of place. Yeah, I guess it works. Um, at least I hope it will. Uh, but You can see the number of corners and the changing of materials in this thing all means this build is going to take longer than a lot of the other ones, even though the building itself isn't as big as some of them. So it does go on for a while. When you get glimpses of the habitat beyond the building, you can see the brown uh, marker where I painted the terrain to make sure that when the fencing goes in, I will have enough space for what I think Torvosaurus will want. Uh, I'm basing that on what material came out earlier in the development of the game, where the devs did sort of the trading cards of the 50 animals, and comparing that to alpha animals of comparable size to take a guess at what its requirements will be. It may not turn out to be right. So to keep up the theme of those slat walls, I'm using this piece, which matches them pretty well, and creating a different sort of slat wall, in part to keep guests headed for the elevator from leaving the building into the park, and in part to keep them from falling out of the stairs. It's sort of an implied wall. It sort of physically is there, but visually isn't completely solid. And it's a really neat effect. So I thought I'd use it. um, you can see the stair sticking out through the wall. That's another one of those things that will need to be scaled ultimately. My solution for this building is scaling, but a lot of times you can use trim to hide these things if that makes for a nicer building in your mind. Anyway, one of the other things you can see when you catch a glimpse of the habitat is that there's a lot of pines of various kinds out there, because it's gymnosperm land in the Jurassic. And I wish we had more of them to put in for a little bit more variety. And we will get more. We just don't have them yet. So the wooden walls look very unfinished on the ends, and unless you're using that for a special effect, I usually want to hide that. So it tends to be columns. And so this building is becoming kind of a frontier, but a frontier feel to a modern timber frame kind of structure, even though it's all paneled walls. So there are posts at every corner, and any place where a wall meets a wall. All of this helps break up that very busy slat wall element with the short strips, which can get very overwhelming when it's in massive amounts or really large walls, and that's not so good. But right now we only have the two wood textures and no recoloration. So one is the floor for the upper story of this, and the other is the trim work with the slat walls and the posts. So I could have run this much faster as a speed up to get through, but because this is a more intricate building, I thought people might be interested in seeing the pieces go together a little bit more clearly without having to scream, stop, stop, slow down, I can't see what's happening at their screens, or just turning the thing off because they're frustrated. And yeah, so there it is. There'll be a faster part later because it doesn't really show the, some of the different work that's being done in this building. You'll also notice those zoom outs periodically because I'm looking at it to try to make a decision and think about it. What works, what doesn't. And, kind of like this bit, there's no good way to do that, to trim off that edge with the normal stuff. You can see that it kind of fights on the upper end of that slot, and there's a sort of hole between the two trim elements right there at the corner. And eventually I will come back with an answer to that. But I didn't have it at this point in the build, so it isn't there. Things like deciding that the arch from that 4-meter tall wall piece was just too tall. So I wanted to bring that down, and so I had a 1-meter wall piece and hope that it all will play nicely with the final elevator, door air elements and stuff like that. But it needs to be roofed over too, because we don't want our accessibility challenge guests getting rained on while they wait for an elevator. And in a tropical park, that's a definite thing you got to be aware of and be prepared for, because it's tropical, particularly in the rainy season. Getting rid of one of those ugly wall elements again. I think it was shaping up pretty good so far, and was pretty happy with that. So I decided to throw a few trash cans at it, in a classic form of putting them right at the doors, so people coming in can get rid of their trash before they enter the viewing area. In the real world, there might have been, a no food and beverages inside kind of sign. And of course, people will ignore that sometimes and bring them in anyway, but you can only do what you can do. And I needed supports for the upper level because, of course, it doesn't match the fencing glass to have the exact same curve. So this is part of the standoff concept. For this, some of this would mean, I think, that a real animal like the Torvosaurus might be somewhat leery about going through a tight space like that. Might not be enough to stop one, but a little bit more deterrent. And concrete pillars to ground the things, because we don't want our wood rotting out, or some of the wood-eating insects of the tropical area taking our columns down. So this is the start of keeping the Torvosaurus away from the glass. And rocks that he can't walk on is the answer I'm using here. Oops, didn't mean to copy that floor. So the idea is to use a vertical rock that isn't walkable for him to function as a wall, but seem a little more natural to the viewers, make them less clear that they're separated from the animal. Because Torvosaurus could potentially step over that. And in fact, when I let the thing out later and used some of the rock piles in front of these things, he managed to find a way to walk up the rock pile to the low point in those more or less vertical rocks and stand on it. And so, readjust. Because sooner or later he'd end up on the other side of it. So part of the solution was to add a concrete barrier. And I think the AI may have trouble with that. We'll see. In the early demo, you could pen a Tyrannosaur in with a 1 meter wire fence. He just recognized it as a barrier and wouldn't cross it, even though he could step right over it. But this also will help blend the base of the wall glass, the barrier glass, into the concrete wall next to it. Yeah, there are different colors of concrete, but still got my fingers crossed that the concrete will be colorable and I can get it to look closer. So this is pulling the slat wall out there, was, hey, it's missing something for the entrance. And then covering that with a roof. Same reason for our accessibility challenge guests. Don't want people necessarily standing in the rain. But this slat wall also will ultimately provide me with a place to put the animal's name. And to play into the same thing that was going on with the elevator's roof and that kind of frontier effect, both of those stairwell towers will get the same sloped roof, again, in a way evoking those corner towers on a frontier fort. only in the broadest sense. Architect-y speak. So there's the big element for that little garden area, one of the tropical pines, to put in there and have it as tall as the building. So it has grown up uh, and it can have its light. In the real world, this is the kind of thing where they'd build a building around it and it would be a captive tree. I'll eventually come back and throw some smaller plants in that light well, preferably things that can do okay in shade. And it's also open to the sky for them, so they will get a natural tropical environment rainfall. Yeah, didn't like those exposed rooftops, so we do a little capping for the slanted stairwell walls. And that's two of the roof edgings back to back and then scaled so that they are just a little bit bigger than the wall itself. They would be just simply something to keep the rain flowing off the tops of the wall so nothing pools there and causes rot. So it's getting pretty close to done, except for the fussy work in terms of the structure, I think. Yeah. It is. So this is the faster build. You can see the main walls are already in place, and it needs a roof and some trim out. This is the care building. I'm not doing a lot of fuss with this one because just because. Getting the usual treatment of fancier surface where the guests can see it. And then it's time to do a little bit of the interior work. Also, you're seeing this done pretty fast because, you've seen me do this kind of stuff before if you've been following along on Atebeno Park. And it's nothing really new. Most of this is just the concept is what's different here. This set of 4 chairs, or benches actually, and where to set them so guests can get around them and right up to the glass, but also people could sit in them, particularly when there's less of a crowd, and sit and watch the Torvosaurus if they want to. And the other 2 in that little alcove, if we ever get vending machines, there might be one in there or something. But then again, I said maybe they couldn't have food and drink in here, so who knows. But also, it's a little bit of a way area, so someone could pull their small child away when they get scared of the Torvosaurus, short of taking them down and out of the building. Kids can get funny, I'm scared of it, but I want to see it, kind of attitudes. So I wanted to put a little faux staff path of ground cover and start setting up some of the terrain painting for the area. And I obviously haven't finished the habitat area itself yet, nor fenced it in where it will be fenced in. Part of the idea here is I'm using a deep channel in the river there, something too deep for the Torvosaurus to go through. At least I hope it'll be too deep for the Torvosaurus. The way the game is running now, it's too deep for a Tyrannosaurus. So unless the Torvosaurus is some kind of special swimmer, it'll be held in by that. As you've already seen, I also took the opportunity to start doing some landscaping on the staff side of this area, setting up this banana plantation and also working on the riverside plants to just make things look a little more natural and blend things in and just make the place look prettier. Doing that work to get stuff there to help with the shadows at the water's edge. The trees sometimes freak out doing that. There's a little jump there. You can see the bridge has been beautified with the posts and the rope edging. And there is the habitat. So we're going to take a little quick tour in here past that, whatever that is in the pond. And there's the entry with Torvosaurus. And you can see the column over there to fill the hole at the corner of the roof. I put railings in on the stairs and the walkway to the elevator, and the doors are in. Metal elevator doors, and the plants in the planter. And we can go up the stairs up to the area where, glass, so our guests can get a glimpse of the outside on their way up. Sometimes the controls just don't let me drive well. Up the stairs, there, not through the roof, to the viewing area. And there's our pseudo Torvosaurus out there, wandering around. And you can see the back sitting area, which gives a view out over the entrance into the viewing building and down the path to the upper plaza of the park. And good view of the habitat. It's been landscaped a bit more for open Jurassic plain. I don't know what Tarbo's requirements for plants will be. Yes, I know. You're not Tarbo, but it'll do. So I don't know how much I want to really put in here yet. So when we get the stats for Tarbo, I may be making adjustments. We've got viewing screens inside the building, and we've got some plants that are sticking through the wall I need to fix. And yeah, so I like the mountains in the back there. So zooming out through the habitat and turning around to look back at the building, you can see I did some work to make our rock walls blend in and to hide the concrete walls from where they can be seen from the viewing building for the most part. Now we'll go across the river to get the effect from over there. And you see the rock work on that corner of the exhibit. And on that side you see where there will be a cliff. It's just roughly painted now. And the situation of the habitat in the park being our first Jurassic exhibit. And that's going to bring us close to the end of this video. And I'll be, of course, back with more. And if you like the stuff, please click a like. And if you are enjoying the stuff and don't feel you necessarily like it, but still want to see more, you can subscribe, and that encourages me to do more. So now leaving it to Atebeno Park for today. Thank you for stopping by. This is Dino Bob, and once again, I will see you in another video. Thanks for coming.